Good morning. My name is Associate Professor Des Graham. I'm the Chair of MS Australia and I'm a person living with MS. It's my great pleasure to open the 5th live update on MS research and the progress into MS. We are streaming to you from Tasmania, where we have just hosted Australia's premier scientific research conference on multiple sclerosis. Given that this is the land of the Myelin people, I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet. The Myelin people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge the Menzies Institute for Medical Research, a powerhouse of research both here in Australia and particularly in Tasmania, and the sponsor of the live update today. We're going to hear what has been going on at our conference, and then we will hear from 4 leading people in the field of MS. There is a chance for you all to submit your questions, but I will let the co-host of today's event give you the full details. And to host today's event, I'm joined by Caitlin Sapir, Managing Director of ED-Vid and a person living with MS, and Dr. Hamish Campbell, the Deputy Head of MS Research at MS Australia.
Thank you, Des, and thank you to everybody at home who's joined us today as we stream across Australia and around the world. Of course, as Des mentioned, I'm joined by my co-host Caitlin for our live update today. Caitlin, you're a busy person, you're a serial entrepreneur, and you're a person living with MS. What does MS research mean to you, and what do you hope to hear about today?
Thank you so much, Hamish. You're leading some incredible research in the MS area too, which I'm very thankful for. It's incredible what research has been undertaken and the progress that we've made over the past 50 years. As a person living with MS, I've got an amazing team and amazing research behind me, so I'm very hopeful for the future. In fact, medication that I took just a few years ago has meant that my lesions have stopped in their tracks and some have even reversed, to the surprise and delight of my neurologist. And I think it's amazing that we have this kind of forum live to be able to share online with all of those who are interested in the MS research area too.
Excellent. And I'd also like to thank our sponsor for today's event, the Menzies Institute for Medical Research. And that's where some wonderful MS research is conducted. And of course, it's actually the home to 2 of the researchers who we're going to hear from today. And on that note, I'd like to pass it back to you, Caitlin.
Thank you, Hamish. So let's run through what we have in store for today. So we are live streaming to you as part of the MS Australia Progress in MS Research Scientific Conference in beautiful Hobart. Hamish will fill us in on key MS research info coming out of that event shortly. We will then speak to 4 experts in the field of MS research on some really interesting topics, including genetics, remyelination, and the role of nurses in the care and support of those in MS, and how the field of care of MS is evolving. So more details about our speakers and their topics will be showing on your screen now. After that, we will have the opportunity to put your questions to the MS experts in our Q&A panel discussion. Thanks to everyone who has already sent in questions when you registered for the live stream. There's some really interesting ones in there that Hamish will cover a bit later, and the team at MS Australia has been very busy collating these. If you haven't submitted a question but would like to, there is still time. Simply send us a message via our Facebook page on the screen. So without further ado, Hamish, can you tell us more about the progress in MS Research Scientific Conference?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to give a bit more context to this, MS Australia's Progress in MS Scientific Conference, it has been held every 2 years typically, and of course there's been a bit of a hiatus recently because of course we've been in the middle of a pandemic, so it's actually great to finally be back in person, and it really allows kind of networking and kind of collaboration, so we can really share resources around the country and share share ideas, to really advance MS research. And really the kind of purpose of the conference is really to stimulate that innovative research. And of course it covers areas of prevention, the causes of MS, improved treatments, and hopefully of course ultimately a cure for MS. And it's really through promoting that exchange of scientific ideas and materials that I think we can really make an impact on MS. And also it's really important to support our Australian MS researchers. It was quite hard to really summarize all the things that happened, and I have probably picked out some of the things that were favourites of mine, and so I apologise to some of the researchers who I can't mention. One of the highlights I think was Professor Michael Barnett, and he's a clinician but also a researcher in Sydney, and he's using MRI and some of the latest technologies in imaging and kind of coupling that with artificial intelligence and machine learning to really trying to get a complete picture of what's happening in the brain during MS. And now traditionally, of course, we've kind of probably counted the number of lesions that can be seen on an MRI scan and use that as kind of to measure progression. But what Professor Barnett was looking at is looking at kind of the slow expansion of lesions. So lesions that are just slowly expanding, and what impact that has on the health of people with MS. And actually, from his research, it looks at that may even be a driver of progressive MS, something that we've probably has been a little bit elusive to the state. So it's still very early research, but it's really promising. And he and his team are trying to develop these tools so they can use them in the clinic in kind of the real world situation, and also kind of apply it to kind of large databases of clinical information to really, so we can kind of predict what's happening. So I thought that was very interesting. We also heard from Professor Bruce Taylor, who is actually from the Menzies and colleagues of two of the experts we're going to hear from today. And what he's been doing is he's been following the population of the greater Hobart area for a number of years, and he presented results from a study and showed that in the 10 years leading up to 2019 that there'd been a 48% increase in prevalence of MS in the greater Hobart area. So that of course is very sobering, but he also showed that the life expectancy of people with MS in the area has increased over that time, and now is very close to the general population. So that's also very comforting. But the last thing I would mention about Professor Taylor's work is, of course, we've known for a long time that people in the northern parts of Australia actually have a lower risk of developing MS compared to those at the southern parts. And what he's some of the results he showed at the conference really kind of indicated that starts really early on, even maybe just as people were born, or even before during pregnancy, that some of these risk factors may have kind of start early in life. So that's very interesting, but it does really highlight the importance of understanding some of the risk factors in developing MS. And kind of along those lines, we're very lucky to have Catherine Fitzgerald, who beamed in from Johns Hopkins University in the States, and she was looking at obesity and the effects of obesity kind of in adolescence and the risk of developing MS. And she was also looking at various dietary interventions, mainly around kind of calorie restriction. So of course it's very, very early stages for that as well, but I would kind of suggest if anybody is going to change their diet, to do it in conjunction with a healthcare professional. But we also heard from dietary experts here in Australia as well, and kind of the importance of following the Australian healthy dietary guidelines, which unfortunately many of us don't. So there was a whole range of topics looking at diet. We also had two further international experts who beamed in. These were both experts on myelination, like kind of learning how to kind of myelin develops and what cells are evolved right from early stages in development, and just kind of the plasticity later in life. So we had Professor Bruce Appel and Assistant Professor Ethan Hughes from the University of Colorado, and they're both really experts in their field. And it was really interesting to kind of see how that's developing, because it's really important that we understand some of these mechanisms mechanisms, and one of our speakers today is probably going to talk more on remyelination and myelination, which is of course so important. Anyway, that's probably just a really small taste of what happened at the conference, and we will write some articles in our newsletter and put some more information up on our website so people can get a more in-depth view, because that was probably quite a general summary. So back to you.
Thanks, Hamish. All very interesting topics for sure. As someone with MS, I've had my fair share of MRIs, so it'll be very interesting to see how that might shape how neurologists look at those scans. And as well, definitely, I've tried basically every diet that someone with MS should try. So I'll be very interested to see what comes out of that too, if there's any recommendations for those living with MS. So thank you for that summary. It was amazing. Yep, sounds like there's some really interesting research coming out at the moment. And before we meet our first researcher, don't forget that you can get involved in the conversation around this event as it happens on social media. Simply head to Facebook or Twitter. I am now very excited to hear from the MS experts on some very interesting and diverse topics on how we will better support and treat those living with MS like myself.
Yeah, excellent. And so our first expert we have is Dr. Nicholas Backburn. Dr. Nicholas Backburn is a research fellow in computational genetics at the Menzies Institute for Medical Research. He's originally from Tasmania, and he has spent time overseas as an assistant professor in human genetics before returning to the Menzies as a research fellow working on computational genetics and MS. Dr. Blackburn, before we start, can you actually explain what computational genetics is?
Thank you, Hamish. So if you sat 10 different computational geneticists down at a table and asked them what computational genetics is, they'd each give you a different answer. For me, computational genetics is about building a bridge from the clinic to biology, from working with patients through to understanding the underlying factors that have contributed to the development of their disease. So I work with data from people with MS to try and understand MS better at a fundamental level. The type of data I work with is genetic. It's DNA. It's the code of life. We are studying why, at a fundamental level, at a cellular level, why people are more likely to develop MS, and why is that encoded in their biology.
Excellent. So I understand that you're leading a study on MS families. So can you tell us about that? And is MS inherited?
So we know that for 20% of people with MS, they have a family history of disease. This means that someone else that they are related to also developed MS. The question of whether MS is inherited, we know that MS has a genetic component together with its other complex environmental factors that work together to drive someone to develop disease. This genetic component varies from person to person, but for some people that genetic component is really strong, and this maps to their family history. We study some unusual and rare families where multiple people in the family, 3, 4, 5 individuals, develop MS.
No.
We study these families to try and understand why they specifically have been put on a pathway to MS development.
So you've got these families. How do you actually study the genetic variation that they may have?
So we use whole genome sequencing to read the entire genetic code of each individual in the family. We then compare the code of someone with MS to an unaffected family member to identify what DNA variation is present in the person with MS that is not in their unaffected family members. This leads us to genes that we can then move to the laboratory to study how these are starting to develop, how they influence MS development. We study these specifically in 2 models at Menzies. One is using mouse models, where we introduce the human mutation that we've found into a mouse model, make the equivalent type of mouse to match the human, and study how it affects the mouse brain and the central nervous system. And we can study the behavior of the mouse over many months and years to see how that may map back to MS disease pathology. The other way we study these mutations is using induced pluripotent stem cells. This is where a person in the family has kindly donated some blood to us that we reprogram into becoming stem cells that we can study in the dish in the laboratory. This is together with a large team, including another speaker that you'll see today, Dr. Jessica Fletcher, where we differentiate these stem cells into the brain cells that we're interested in, to study how cells from people with specific genetic mutations, how these cells may be becoming MS-like in the dish.
Nice. I mean, you're also part of the Australian-New Zealand MS Genetics Consortium, ANSGene. What is that, and how does that work?
So ANSGene is one of MS Australia's platforms, and it's a collaboration with MS researchers and clinician researchers across Australia and New Zealand, where together we've built the critical mass of DNA samples from people with MS. I've recently joined ANSGene in the last couple of years. ANSGene's been running since the early 2000s. The benefit of ANSGene is the community coming together to increase the numbers for which we can study the genetic variation, so we can understand the genes underlying MS at the population level.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really genetics is a numbers game, and I suppose kind of that collaboration has really kind of driven it. So thank you very much, Nick. That's been really informative, and it's really exciting to see what kind of technology is leading to in the field of genetics and MS. But before we hear from our next MS researcher, there's still time to submit questions for our question and answer panel later in the show. Simply message the questions to us on Facebook or via the email address shown on the screen. While we can't answer every question due to time constraints, our research team will be working hard behind the scenes to compile all your questions, and those that we can't answer live, we'll respond to you as soon as we can after the event has concluded. Remember, if there's someone who you think would be interested in this live stream, make sure you share it via Facebook or via our website. Now, back to you, Caitlin. What have we got coming up next?
Thanks, Hamish. So, well, next up, we're going to hear about ways in which we can promote repair of MS-mediated damage in the brain from the expert based in Tasmania, Dr. Jessica Fletcher. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Fletcher. I'm very interested to hear a bit more about your research, particularly as it pertains to remyelination. So my first question for you is, in MS, it's thought that the immune system attacks part of the brain and spinal cord. What is actually going on?
So thank you so much for having me. So that's a really great question, and it's actually one of the questions that we are actively looking at and investigating. So we have known for a really long time that immune cells actually invade and infiltrate into the brain and spinal cord of people with MS. But what we don't know is the sequence of events that lead to that. And so, as you've heard, we're taking different approaches to try and investigate what that is. One of them is by collaborating with geneticists like Nick, who are able to identify variants that could be acting in different pathways that could lead with that, and then using our cellular and animal models to sort of investigate that. And hopefully the goal is, by understanding that, we can actually identify the points at which we could actually intervene and actually then stimulate myelin repair and have a remyelinating or brain repair therapy that can actually stop MS in its tracks.
Amazing. Probably one of the most important pieces of research that's going on right now. Remyelination is, the implications for people living with MS is incredible. I think about it, that possibility, being able to reverse some of the damage that I've had from episodes that I still experience to this day is just, mind-blowing, really. So thank you for that research. And when you're talking about repairing the damage, what does that mean?
So we know that myelin is the target of the immune system. And so when that is stripped away, the ability of your nerve cells or your neurons to actually communicate with each other becomes significantly diminished. And so luckily, we have a population of cells called Oligodendrocyte progenitor cells, or OPCs. And these are cells that we have as children, and when we're actually developing myelin, there's lots of them, and they grow, and then they make contact with our nerves, and they wrap and make the myelin. We're also very lucky that as adults, we still have these populations of OPCs. And so one of the main strategies that we're doing is trying to find ways that we can actually recruit these OPCs that are present in the brains of everybody, including people with MS, to actually recruit them and stimulate them to actually then rewrap the nerves that have become damaged by the immune system.
Amazing. And in terms of what does this mean for people living with MS, remyelination therapies?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's most exciting about the fact that we have this ability to remyelinate nerves. So we want to basically prevent this nerve cells from dying. And so if we can actually stimulate the remyelination capacity, we can actually then re-establish the communications that have been lost in terms of the cell, but we can also establish the communication and support that the OPCs and oligodendrocytes, so the glial cells, actually provide to the neurons. And so by doing that, we kind of reset in some ways. And so we can basically stop the cells from dying, and because you can't make something that's died reappear. So it's really important that we get it to repair before you've actually lost the nerve damage.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
So in terms of if a person with MS has had an episode, and let's just say that episode meant that they had issues with their vision, potentially. In remyelination, if the episode happens, does that mean that it can't, that's not going to help the damage that's already occurred? It's more about before then?
I would say prevention is always better than a cure.
Yeah, right.
But I would say it depends on the status of the nerve at that time. So we also know that brain cells actually or neurons have an actually incredible capacity to deal with toxicity and damage. And so it's mostly about the reserve and how long and the duration of that exposure to that damage. So obviously also finding ways that we can measure and detect that is really important in terms of developing tools to actually better manage it and actually then have that potential to restore function to some degree.
Absolutely. So that probably brings me to my final question. What do you think the challenges are to developing effective myelin repair strategies?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier with the first question, is actually understanding the interactions that happen with the brain and the immune system, and actually understanding and being able to model what those different interactions are in the laboratory. So we can actually be able to develop new interventions and new treatments, and we can test them really robustly. And so with the work that we're doing with the human-induced pluripotent stem cells, hopefully that will be a new way that we can actually do that, because there's been a lot of remyelinating therapies that have gone to clinical trial, but still we have not had one that has reached you guys as people living with MS. And part of that is because we need to be able to understand what's going, so we can actually be really targeted in our processes. And we don't really have a good laboratory model of MS at the moment. So hopefully our work will develop a new one that will streamline that translation from the discovery and where I sit to the pipeline of having therapies for you that will improve your lives.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Jessica. I do think that we're well on our way to uncovering some really amazing therapies that can go beyond the clinical trial. So in terms of what is coming up next, we have Dr. Therese Burke, an Australian MS nurse who has advanced and supported MS nurses internationally, who will be talking to us about the important role of MS nurses in healthcare, and a special report released just this week outlining the importance of the MS nurse in Australia. And then Professor Helmut Bultzkieven from Melbourne, Australia, who will be telling us a bit more about the advancements in digital technologies and what impact that's having on MS. But before we get to our two amazing speakers next, I wanted to quickly mention MS Australia's great fundraising campaign, May 50K, which of course is coming up in May. A lot of this research would not be possible without your support and without these fundraising efforts. The May 50K is quickly becoming an iconic fitness challenge, encouraging Australians to run or walk for over 50 kilometres in the month of May. Of course, it's important for us to keep fit and healthy and look after our mental health, so the May 50K is an amazing way to do that and also raise funds for MS research. In fact, just a little tidbit, Japan has the lowest obesity and cardiac issue rates in the world because they walk quite a lot during the day. So walking is just such an amazing way to stay fit, even if you can't make it to F45 or any of those other exciting exercises that people do. You can go for a solo run or go for a walk with your colleagues during the day. It's really easy to fit in. I actually did the 50K last year with my family and my partner's family, and I became a little bit addicted to walking. So now I walk half an hour to 40 minutes every morning, and I lowered my resting heart rate to 55 BPM, which I just wanted to brag about. And here's some more info about the May 50K. What an amazing video. And of course, you can head over to the website www.themay50k.org and sign up. I hope, Hamish, you are prepared for this year's challenge, and I think we might have to set up a little bit of friendly competition this year.
Yeah, I think we should. Of course, you can set your own targets, but I think we should have a little bit of a competition. But the great thing about it is, of course, you can do whatever you like and whatever you're capable to do, because of course some people with MS can find different ways to take part. Of course, being a virtual event at the moment is really great because that means you don't need to sign up to events where there's lots of people as well. So that's also a great thing. But now we're going to hear about how MS nurses improve the lives of people living with MS. And this is from an amazing former president of the MS Nurses Australasia and an award-winning MS nurse, Dr. Therese Burke. Not only Therese Burke is an internationally awarded MS nurse, she has also completed her PhD focusing on the understanding the lived experience of people with MS and identifying ways to improve the quality of life with people improving the quality of life for people with MS. She's then followed that up with postdoctoral research looking and defining the role of MS nurses in Australia. So welcome, Dr. Burke.
Thanks for having me, Hamish.
Right, well, we're going to get straight into it because I have a series of questions I'm dying to ask you. Can you actually tell us a little bit about the role of MS nurses and what they do?
I'd be delighted to, and I'm thrilled that this report has come at this time. So MS nurses work in a variety of settings. You'll find them in public hospitals in MS clinics, you'll find them in MS organisations in the community, with private neurologists, or as part of pharmaceutical supported patient support programs. So variety of settings, but they have a lot of common core skills. They're highly specialised, work at a very advanced practice level. MS nurses are particularly impactful at the beginning of the course of MS, working with people when they're first diagnosed, just to help them through that very complex first few months where it can be absolutely overwhelming. So nurses provide a lot of education to patients and their loved ones as well about MS. They also help a lot with the decision making around what the treatments are going to be, because that can be very overwhelming with so many choices. And nurses are really good at getting stuck into finding out about lifestyle and what your beliefs are and what's happened with you with other things in your life, so that they can help you make the best decisions around those complex things. They can also offer guidance around employment and helping with making decisions with disclosing your diagnosis to loved ones. That can be very overwhelming. So they're sort of there to work hand in hand with you through all of the issues that come about, but not just at the beginning, but right through the life trajectory of living with MS, particularly at times of relapse. They can really help with relapse management, preventing emergency and hospital admissions, helping with symptom management, helping recognise relapses, and also I think what is and what isn't MS, which can also be very overwhelming at the beginning. Nurses are very privileged to see the highs of what their patients go through, but also the lows. I've sat with people for hours trying to work out how they're going to tell the person they love most in the world that they have MS, rehearsing how they might do that. And then we've had really exciting moments as well where I've been the first person to find out that someone's pregnant after a long-awaited pregnancy wait. So it's a very privileged role. But we also support neurologists in many ways as well. So neurologists have such a massive caseload that sometimes they don't have the time to really spend with helping people understand the complexities of MS, and that's where nurses can actually help support them.
Excellent. You alluded to a report. So
Yes.
that's the study that was released yesterday. What's the story behind that? What is it, and what's the story behind that?
Okay, so the study took place through the Australian MS Longitudinal Study, which has been running in Australia for over 20 years now. And this is really great community-based research that people can become involved with. The details are on our website. And it builds data over time. So this particular survey looked at patterns of access to MS nurses and the impact that MS nurse care had on people, but we were able to layer it with previous studies about disease-modifying therapies and health outcomes. So we had about 1,400 people that participated, so not a small study by any stretch of the imagination, and from that we were able to extrapolate data to help us build a picture of what MS care is like in Australia.
So did it show any differences between groups who did have access to MS nurses versus those that didn't?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually knocked our socks off, Hamish. It was profound, the differences. So they were very significant. So people who had access to MS nurse care had lower levels of disability, they had slower rates of self-reported disease progression, they had lower rates of depression and anxiety, and all 13 symptom scores that we looked at for MS, things like fatigue, spasticity, bladder and bowel symptoms, they were all lower, every single one of them. And overall, people had a higher quality of life.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're having such a large impact. So surely, was any analysis done on like the cost benefit to the healthcare system to actually have MS nurses?
Yeah, and that was a really important part of the study, Hamish, because it's nice to have the evidence to prove physically what's happening, but we need the economic benefits. And we found that we extrapolated the results. We found that about a third of people did not have access to MS nurses. So we extrapolated that to the whole Australian population of 25,600 people. So that works out about just over 8,000 people who probably don't have access right across Australia. Huge number. So we figured that if we got about 50 more MS nurses to help fill those gaps and get that access for people, we could potentially, that would cost about $5 million a year, but we could potentially cost save over $60 million a year, which is, you know,
That's
and that economic analysis actually originally came from the Menzies. So they came to help us look at that based on their previous data. And that was quite conservative data, so the actual figures are probably quite higher. And you might be wondering what that's from, but nurses, if they're keeping people out of emergency rooms, keeping people out of hospital, and there's less disability progression, it's going to
And not
impact
to
over
mention the
time.
quality of life improvement as
And
well.
that's actually priceless,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
The quality of life. We can't even put a number on that.
Yep.
So Did the report kind of come up with any recommendations to try and help the situation?
Yeah. And this is the best thing about it, that we've got the evidence now, but what are we going to do about it? We need to move this forward. So the first thing we need to do is raise awareness of the value of MS nurses and the problems that we're having. And so that's what we're doing with the launch of the report. The second thing we need to do is get more nurses into the workforce so that we can meet that unmet need. And so we need to be starting to lobby and advocate for that through state and federal means, and also private funders. We need to also improve the access to MS nurses. And one way of doing that could be through telehealth, because that's been so successful through COVID. So now that's pushed us forward to see that that's a really realistic way, particularly for people that are remote and regional, because they really miss out. 50% of those people didn't have access to MS nurses. So if we can improve the telehealth situation with rebates and funding for that, we can really push that forward. And we also want to support the existing workforce, because we can't afford to lose one single of the 90 MS nurses we have in Australia at the moment. We can't afford to lose one. So we need to support them with mentorship, preceptorship, training, and other support.
Well, excellent. Thank you. We probably don't have time to kind of go into it too much more, because the thing is, I think we could probably have a live update just on that topic alone. But if you are interested in finding out more information, go to our website at www.msaustralia.org.au, and also while you're there, you could check out some of the latest research and some of the advocacy work we do at MS Australia. Also, don't forget to share this live stream if you're watching either via Facebook or via our website, and make sure you forward it to your friends and family who may be interested. But anyway, now it's time to hear from our final expert, but I'll hand you back to Caitlin.
Thank you, Hamish. We now have Professor Helmut Butzkoven, which I'm very excited to speak to today. So he is a MS neurologist who heads a number of research programs to improve outcomes and trials in people with MS. He's the head of the Department of Neuroscience at Monash University and Director of Neurology at Alfred Health. And to top it off, Professor Butzkoven is Managing Director of the MS Base Foundation that funds which administers a global online MS cohort study with more than 80,000 patients enrolled in 16 centres across 40 countries. Welcome, Professor Butzkoven.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's a big introduction. You're a very, very impressive guy, so I'm very excited to ask you a few more questions about your work. So the first question that I have for you is, you have the largest MS clinical database in the world, which spans over 36 countries. What have we learnt from such vast data, and where do you think it will take us?
Thank you for the question. We're very proud of MS Base because it's based in Australia, but it is really monitoring outcomes for people with MS all over the world. We have records, longitudinal records over time in more than 80,000 people. And what we do with that data collectively, because it's not me, it's all of the investigators, hundreds of them really all over the world, is to try and answer really practical questions in MS management. So for example, you as a person with MS might come to a decision point in your life. You might want to, for example, become pregnant. Or your treatment isn't working anymore and you want to switch to a new treatment, or you want to start a treatment. And you might have heard, when you have that conversation with your care team, with your neurologist, you might have heard the phrase, look, we don't have two of you. So we're going to make the best guess that we can, make the best possible decision. We don't absolutely know. Well, the good news about MS Base is that with those 80,000 people, we actually do have two of you. We can find your perfect match. And two people in completely different parts of the world, with the same age, the same disease history up to that point, might make different decisions. And we can follow those decisions and work out which one was the best one. So very practically, then we suddenly have evidence where the neurologist might say, look, I think based on the data you should do this and not that. And we can prove that this actually improves outcomes for people with MS, less disability, less relapses.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And what do you think digital technologies, what role do you think they will play in monitoring MS?
I think there's two somewhat separate conversations here. And I don't want to talk about all digital technologies because we have lots of them.
Like this, our Apple Watches. Yep.
Look, Apple Watches are actually part of the conversation.
Great.
These digital technologies have the capacity to monitor us passively, step counts. Actively, we can engage in, I don't know, Wordle or or playing games, typing, but we can also do things using apps. And there's a lot of development in essentially apps to help us measure how fast people walk, how well they can turn, how well they can use their arms, or how quickly they react to things. Short little snippet tests, and also kind of fun, but that you can do over and over again.
Yep.
And if you do that, you actually, of course, get longitudinal data on a trajectory that might tell us whether you're getting worse, getting better, or staying the same. And because you could do that once a day, once a week, once a month, that's going to be much, much more often than the care visits you might have with your neurologist.
Definitely.
And it's also incredibly quantitative, right? Because you draw a square on a screen that actually collects 800 bits of data in 1 second. About how long you paused, how well you stayed in the line, all of that sort of thing. So what do we then do with it? Well, 2 ideas really here. One of them is that it brings the clinic to the home in a way. It could alert us all if something is changing. And then we can make an assessment as to why it's changing. Potentially change medication, potentially it might be that you've had to go to the toilet a lot at night, and therefore you're really tired and not reacting so quickly. So it might be lots of things, but it's a kind of sensitive sensor that something is going on, that perhaps we should call you back and, make an assessment.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I know it's a long answer, but the second thing is my absolute passion. You've heard from amazing researchers already today, and in the conference we've heard about lots of potential approaches to help repair, restore, remyelination. All of this research is going on all over the world, and there are millions and millions of really good leads as to, how we might be able to intervene to stop and reverse MS damage. But we can't do enough clinical trials for all the things that we already know. And the barrier to clinical trials in progressive MS is not the knowledge itself as to what we should be trying, but it's actually how to trial it. We need a system that can tell us fairly quickly if somebody is getting worse, better, or the same. So we could test these drugs, or diets, or vitamins, or fats, lots of things. We could test these things in 40 or 50 people per group, and over 6 months get an idea whether it works. Just a basic idea whether it works, and then it can go into the big clinical trials and eventually come as a treatment to people with MS. And digital technologies might really help here, because they might tell us very quickly whether somebody is getting worse, because they are very, very precise. They might tell you that your reaction time is getting worse by 10 milliseconds. You wouldn't know that. And it doesn't necessarily at that point actually affect your function, which is a good thing, but we can see it.
Yep.
And this is absolutely required. And all over the world, we're working in systems. One of them is called the Progressive MS Alliance, strongly supported by MSA, to solve that problem.
Yeah, that's incredible. I totally agree. Even when I was diagnosed with MS, how can my neurologist, I only had a few interactions with my healthcare professional along my journey, how can I track additional data to, again, be more proactive or to understand if I'm getting better or worse? So I became obsessed with data. I have a Wi-Fi enabled water bottle that tracks my hydration levels all day, and I have my Apple Watch, and I have all these other things. But I think it's absolutely, where we need to go to get more proactive with being able to treat MS for sure.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And then I have one final question for you, Helmut. So you may have answered this in some ways, but just to leave us with a final anecdote, what do you find the most exciting in terms of current MS research? And do you think we will see a cure or a cure for certain types of MS within the next 2 decades? It's a big question.
So I think the biggest need in the world is to find better approaches, better treatments for progressive MS.
Yep.
People with relapsing remitting MS suffer, there are issues, there are problems, but they are doing much, much, much better than 10 or 20 years ago, because we've had an explosion of knowledge, an explosion of treatments, explosion of better self-management.
Yep.
But for progressive MS, we have very little. So there I'm increasingly optimistic. And this ties a lot of the things that we've discussed together, that we're going to be able to find ways of trying all the amazing things that the basic scientists discover, including wearables, and also that we understand what's actually going on better. If you follow scientific exploration of progressive MS, you get a list of 14 or 15 or 16 things that are going on, which usually means that we don't really know. But now, and Hamish alluded to this, we're getting information that one of the things that might be going on is that in some people, existing lesions that they might have had for 2 decades are actually slowly expanding, and that there's ongoing damage there. And that is actually now the strongest signal predicting worsening in progressive MS. So I think we're honing in on what's actually happening. And with MRI scans, we have a biomarker of it. We can actually measure it, which means that we can work out whether a drug or a treatment will modify that. And that's what we really need. We need those quick biomarkers that tell us whether something is promising to then throw the book at it.
Absolutely.
And that is my exciting, my greatest excitement now is that we're getting to that point.
Definitely.
And that's what we've been waiting for and working on for 2 decades.
100%.
Now, you asked about cures. And people with MS, I interact as a treating neurologist, as a practicing neurologist with lots of people with MS. They're very, very frustrated about the fundamental lack of progress in terms of cures. It turns out it's a massively difficult problem. So I think better treatments, better solutions for progressive MS will definitely occur in the next 2 decades, probably in the next 5 years. For a cure, I think we need to be very lucky. To be able to solve that riddle, because it's an incredibly complicated riddle.
Yeah, definitely.
If I have time, I just want to mention one thing, and that's all this excitement about EBV, because it relates to the potential for cure. If EBV is, especially getting glandular fever, is strongly associated with getting multiple sclerosis, it's possible that EBV vaccinations might actually reduce the incidence of MS or cure it before it even occurs. And there's also a lot of excitement in that field, simply because one of the silver linings of the COVID pandemic has been the development of all these incredible vaccinations, many of which are very new vaccination technologies, which are also now going to be tried in EBV. Because up to now, we haven't been able to solve that. Well, I'm not personally involved in that research, but the world of research hasn't been able to solve the problem of how to create a good vaccination against EBV. But this may now also be progressing, and if that hypothesis is correct, we might be reducing the development of MS.
Absolutely. And that's such an important point to touch on. I think now we're going to have a Q&A with panelists to also speak about a few more engaging questions and topics that have come through.
So
the forums.
I hope at home you've enjoyed hearing from our experts, and of course people have been submitting questions, and the team behind the scenes have been working hard to compile all those questions that have come in. Of course, we won't be able to answer all of them. We've probably had a bit of an in-depth discussion on many areas. Of course, we can't answer any questions about personal treatment options. If you do have any questions about your personal treatment options, we would urge you to speak to your healthcare team. They know your situation and will be able to answer it far better. Now, back to our experts. I'd like to welcome them back to join us. We have Dr. Nicholas Backburn, who of course has talked about genetics. We've got Dr. Jessica Fletcher, who's been talking about repair and remyelination, and Dr. Therese Burke, who's talked about the role MS nurses play in the healthcare of people with MS, and of course Professor Helma Bitz-Kuven, who I think, I don't know how we summarise our chat. We've probably asked you many different questions about the future of MS care. So let's kick the questions off. And now I might direct some of these questions to one of you individually, but for the rest of you, feel free to jump in if you have something to add. So the first is actually Therese. Lisa's written in and says, I don't have access to an MS nurse. How do I go about getting access to an MS nurse?
This was of great concern to us, Hamish, that people would feel really left out once we launched this report, because that's not information that they'd certainly like to hear. Rest assured, Lisa, that we are just starting the battle now. So we are going to do everything we can to get access for every person in Australia that has MS, should they wish the opportunity, of course, to have that. And that starts today for us. So moving forward. But in the meantime, our member organisations, and by that I mean MSWA, MSL, MS Queensland, MSSA and NT, the details are on our website. They all have a certain degree of MS nursing service for the community. So I'd encourage you to contact them. Please don't everybody ring today, because I will be in trouble. But they do offer support and services which can be very welcome in the community. And there's also a list on our website of the MS clinics around Australia. Yep. Once again, please don't ring them all today, but to get you in contact in the meantime. But we will be working on solutions for the future.
Excellent. And yeah, once again, I think people, if they're really interested in the report, should go to our website to kind of see that. The next question I probably will target to Nick, very genetics. I've got MS. What's my chances my kids are going to get MS?
So that's a really important question, and it's one that people with MS often ask when I'm talking to them about our research. We don't have a genetic test for MS yet. We can't predict whether someone's child will, as an adult or later in life, develop MS. So we don't have an answer to the question. But when we look at the numbers overall, first-degree relatives, those that we're closest to in our relationships, our siblings, our parents, and our offspring, have a 3% chance of developing MS. And that is greater than the population risk within the community, but it's still quite small in the overall spectrum. So genetics is part of it, but we don't have a test yet that we can use to help those people.
And we've probably got a kind of a very similar question. Does my genetics determine the outcome of my disease?
Now that is a really interesting question, and it's across multiple domains, whether it is the progression of disability in disease or the response to disease-modifying therapies. We know at the fundamental biology level of gene action that different people will respond to drugs in different ways. And we're starting to get there with different studies to understand whether someone should be on one drug or another drug and how they will respond to that. And we are starting to get there to study genetic predictors of disability in people with MS. We're not there yet, but it's coming.
Excellent.
Can I chime in on that?
Yes, certainly do.
I think it's very important. Studies from MS Base and lots of other groups have shown that disease-modifying treatments do really help reduce the incidence of secondary progressive MS and the worsening of disability. So it's not like your fate in your genes is totally predetermined. This is definitely modifiable, but inherently some people might have a very low risk of ever developing progression, and other people might inherently have a very high risk. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is we don't yet have the genetic tests to to help guide that.
People.
And I suppose with all these treatments, it's going to actually make it hard to find, because different people, it's going to be an extra factor to look in other than just genetics. So the next question we have is, we hear a lot about myelin research and repair, but is there actually anything at the clinical trial stage at the moment? So maybe Jessica and Helmut.
I was going to actually refer back to Helmut, but there are many things in clinical trial stage at the moment, and many different strategies, I think, as well, from more of, like, we have the Taurus trial running through Menzies, and that's transcranial magnetic stimulation, and that's like a non-invasive method to stimulate myelin repair. And then there's also things like dietary supplements that are coming through, but then maybe also more kind of medication style things. But Helmut is definitely the person to answer this one, I think.
So Helmut.
Well, it's Jessica's job to, produce all the knowledge that then goes into clinical trials. But the answer is definitely yes. We have at least 18 major clinical trials going around the world for remyelination. We've had some disappointments last year. But even in those disappointments, there's actually glimmers of real hope. What you have to do is to actually demonstrate that the concept works, right? And then the concept has to work really well enough to actually make a real difference to people. But that's two different stages, because if we know that the concept of remyelination works, then lots of people are going to invest in that. Right? And we have that knowledge. So we've had 2 trials that have shown that biologically, giving drugs to people, these particular drugs to people with multiple sclerosis, actually produces new myelin in their lesions. It hasn't been quite to the point where that improves them, their function well enough for these particular drugs to come to us as new treatments. But that basic knowledge is super important, because it means that there's now an explosion in the field, and I am really optimistic that we're going to find remyelinating drugs.
Excellent. Well, actually, that's probably a very positive note to end on, because unfortunately we're out of time for any more questions. I'd like to thank all of the panel for your contribution and sharing your expert insights with us. And once again, thanks to our major sponsor, the Menzies Institute for Medical Research, and for lending us 2 of their experts, Dr. Backburn and Dr. Fletcher. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you here and hearing insights. I'd also like to thank my fantastic co-host, Caitlin, for all her hard work. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Hamish. It's equally been a pleasure to be a co-host and to learn from all of these amazing people. I'd also like to say that there is actually a recording of this live stream, so you can access this later. You can also share this with friends and family, or anyone who may be interested in MS and in MS research as well.
Excellent. So it'll be on our website, www.msaustralia.org.au. And you can also find us on social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And it's a great way to keep updated with all the latest MS research. And of course, it would not be possible without your generous support. So if you go to our website, there's also the ability to donate, because we couldn't do this without your support. And together you can help us achieve a world without MS. And finally, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that has tuned in. Hopefully you've enjoyed hearing from our experts via our live stream. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.